What will you do to unlock innovation? In today's fast-paced world, innovation might not be enough. Tomorrow's pioneers of change will need to be agile, able to adapt, and committed like never before. Your host, Sannah Vinding, invites you to listen in and join business leaders from around the world as they share their visions for success in our future business challenges.
Welcome to Mind Innovation. I'm your host, Sannah Vinding. I'm always excited to learn. And in today's podcast, we're going to talk about continuous improvement, being able to let go and stay curious so you can ask the good questions. I want to welcome Paul Dunlop. He brings more than 20 years of management and manufacturing experience. He describes himself as a humble learner. He's the principal consultant of Dunlop Consultant and specializes in lean enterprise, especially with the 4 pillars: people, process, play, and profit. Welcome, Paul. I'm so excited you're here today.
Yeah, thank you, Sannah. Appreciate you having me on. Very, very excited to have our chat.
That's good. So where does your passion from continuous improvement or lean, where does that come from?
I've been thinking about that. I'm an only child, so I think innovation comes from that. I think I was born with it. So I think my early childhood meant that I had to create and innovate different ways of play, and sort of reflecting back, I created all sorts of different worlds and whatnot. So I think I had a bit of a passion for it from the get-go. Environmental conditioning. I think through my manufacturing career, I sort of fell into manufacturing, and I started on the shop floor as a machine operator in a greenfield food business. And reflecting back, and that was 20 odd years ago, is that I really learned to innovate there because I was really focused, and I think I'm pretty hardwired to improve processes. And fortunately, I've ended up here. But just improving machinery and equipment, always striving to find a better way. So I think I sort of had that, and then came across lean, and that just ticked all the boxes, and I've sort of gone from there. So that's kind of the very brief background.
So you love to solve problems, right? That's where
I love to try solving problems.
So how do you, when you go in right now as a consultant, I'm sure you've seen a lot of different organizations as well. How do you go in and tell or communicate, saying now there's a change going to happen, and how do you get the team to change with you?
That's a really good question, because it's a question that I see many people struggling with on both sides of the equation, whether it's people that are training or consulting, or the people that are going to be impacted by the change. So for me, and I think I've changed my approach over the years too. So I always, there's a couple of things I say, I make it up as I go along, and I joke about that, but it's not a cookie cutter or a prescriptive approach. So I have a very open mind when I go in. There's a fundamental set of tools and approach that I have, but I sort of go back to Taiichi Ohno and start from need. And that's kind of my guiding principles there. The other part of it is non-judgment and curiosity. So I'm there I'm the tour guide, if you will. I'm there to shine the light on things and look at things and ask good questions, and to empathize with the people that are generally working with pretty dreadful processes that are making their day-to-day life difficult and frustrating. So that's really the approach. My job is to not tell them how to do or what to do. My job is to educate them, but also for them to understand that they are the experts. Many organizations, and I deal a lot with people and on the front lines, whether it's manufacturing or non-manufacturing service, and I'll ask them the question, who's the expert in your job? And I say, oh no, my boss is the expert, and they'll defer to other people or particular things in the company. And I say, no, you guys are experts. Yeah. You are here 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, 48 weeks a year. No one can know your job better than you. Yeah. And that's where I start. And I joke and say, yep, I'm the idiot in the room. I'll learn way more from you than you will from me. but will improve your process together.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good way of looking at it. What if you, and and I don't know if you have experienced this, but what if you experience that you come into an organization where they don't accept that you make mistakes or failures, or maybe they say that they accept it,
Yeah.
but you have a part where they're like, yeah, okay, I did a mistake. This is the plan. This is how I'm going to go back on it. But you also have a group that will like, they're just pointing and saying, no, that's the process that's wrong. I didn't do anything wrong.
Mm. I think it's all about creating the right environmental conditions. So
Yeah.
a large part of lean is taking fear out of the environment, because that's, you know, what you're outlining is a fear-based environment. So it's very important to create that psychological safety. So it's one thing, and I see a lot of, you know, lean businesses that say they're lean and they have a lean culture and lean thinking, but it's, you know, once you scratch at the surface, it's very different, as you say. So I think there's two sides to the equation. Is that there's the people doing the work and adding value in the business, and then there's leadership. And I guess I spend a lot of my time coaching and mentoring leaders to you mentioned let go at the beginning, to let go of the power and the authority and the need to know best, because I think it really is on the leaders to create that culture and to create that safety, to give people permission. And when I come into a business, business owners or CEOs or general managers will say, Paul, we need you to fix our processes, we need you to fix our culture, and so on and so forth. And I guess what they forget is that they're responsible for that. So I always say, well, let's have the conversation where you've either created this or you've allowed this to happen, or both of those. So let's get that out of the way first, and you have responsibility. And now let's work together. If you're serious about, you know, change and going down the lean path, let's work together to change this and to create that environment that you want. And again, I'm not the person that's going to have the answers. The answers are already here.
Yeah.
I'm just going to unlock that for you.
You're the glue, or you help it to get there. Okay. So what if I think there's a lot of companies, I don't know if they need to say they have to upskill, but you have to keep that you're educating your employees, right? To make sure that they are the best of the best, right? Because that's the value, that's the currency. You don't have anything if you don't have the people in your organization. So when you come in, and if you bring like a new flavor and talking about lean, do you do some training first, or how do you start the process? And then on the other hand, when you then are done with it, do you then leave that they will continue and also educate themselves within this area?
Yeah, it's interesting. So my view, so I guess through my leadership and management career, I was always focused on, you know, making myself redundant. So not literally, not putting myself on, but I wanted people to be able to make decisions, to be empowered, to have that permission, and for the process to be robust, that I could walk away. Same thing with my consulting. I'm not interested in being there for forever and a day and being relied upon as the expert. My job is to build capability in that organization. And what good looks like for me is, you know, 2 years down the track, where my ex-clients are still messaging me and sending me photos of things that they've done, and they're standing on their own 2 feet, and they're growing on their own. That's what I want to do. So yeah. I guess back to the initial part of the question is that education is absolutely critical in this.
Yeah.
Again, far too often, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be lean consultants, but any sort of consultant will come in and it will just be a prescription. I had a story the other week in a client where they talked about a previous consultant who'd been in the business, who just, you know, would come out onto the shop floor, out of the boardroom. They'd stand there with a clipboard and they wouldn't talk to anyone. They'd take all these notes and they'd scurry off back into the boardroom and then come back a day later and, okay, guys, this is what we're going to do. And I think those sort of things far too often. So I think what I try and do is give people like I use a lot of simulations. So I teach them the basic fundamentals of lean practically and simply, and also make it fun. Again, because many organizations that I work with have already had a few attempts at lean, and sometimes it's very difficult to even use the word because of the connotations and experience that comes with that. So again, I have a very simple, relatable approach. So yes, the education, whether it's just 8 wastes and flow, basic PDCA, some 5S, some process or value stream mapping, that's always in the front end of my consulting. And then there's enough conversation over a few months to really start to identify, some quick wins, some sort of smaller to medium sized projects, and then there's some bigger picture stuff, which we'll get to. And I think what I was speaking before is that there's a real case of, well, one, what's in it for me? So I want people to understand the benefits of that. And again, it's for them to find that. And the other part is really, I guess that permission side of things is allowing people to do that and to take those steps on their own, and just getting that hands-on practical learning, because in the classroom, often what they'll do is that the experience and the behaviours that play out in the classroom through a simulation will be the same things that are happening out there in the business. And then there's always a sort of a moment where the penny drops and there's smiles on faces, and they get it. Okay, well, how's this similar to what's going on out there? And then it also gives me a point of reference down the track where, remember when we, did the waste simulation, this is the same. So, oh yeah, I get it. And so there's that real connection that we develop. As I said, there's foundational tools that I'll use, but yeah, education is so important.
Yeah. No. So I saw, because I checked you out right on your LinkedIn, that you have Lego serious play. You're saying you can go out and use that as I don't know if you call it a communication tool or if that's the whole setup. So can you tell me more about what does that, how do you go out and implement, or how do you use it, and what's the benefit of using Lego?
So I'd used Lego in one of my lean simulations, and I just saw again the play that happened, and just people reverting almost to childlike behaviour, and they really enjoyed it. Very tactile and all the rest of it. And I have a colleague in New Zealand who had started doing this a couple of years ago, and I was watching him posting on LinkedIn. I sort of piqued my interest, and I thought, oh, there's something in this. And so we had a chat, and yeah, last year I sort of did my training with Michael Fern in Melbourne, and so I've used it quite a bit since, and I find Lego Serious Play to be an incredibly powerful tool. It really is. So I use it in many ways. So I'll use it for one-on-one coaching. I'll use it for team and group activities. Last week, I ran a full day on strategic planning for an organisation, so working with a senior management team and a board. And the power in Lego Serious Play is that in our conventional meetings or conventional brainstorming and problem solving, we'll have a room full of people, but typically the loudest voice will get heard, or the people with position power will be the ones that drive the conversation, and it's not a democratic process. So Lego Serious Play really levels the field. So I think that's one huge benefit. But it also allows people to, like I said, that playful flow state that they get into when they're just playing with Lego. A lot of the conditioning is dropped, and they get to, I guess, unbridled thinking. So there's so much power and depth that comes out, because I guess the Lego Serious Play, for those who are unfamiliar, is really you're building a Lego model in response to a question. And as a facilitator, it's all about asking the best quality questions. So you have to put a lot of thought into the right questions and how those questions are worded. But even last week, in that strategic session, we talked around vision and purpose, and we talked around, I guess, the future steps for the organisation over the next 3 to 5 years. And I was actually, and I often am through Lego Serious Play, emotionally moved by some of the responses and the quality of the responses and the depth and thought of those responses. I think people get into it and they think, oh, this is a bit novel and silly. But once they actually start to tell the story of their model, it makes more and more sense. And the metaphors that come through are just so incredibly powerful and really revealing. So you can cut through a lot of stuff very, very quickly through using Lego Serious Play.
So I tried, I didn't buy the set. I have to admit that here. I went to my son's room and brought it to my team. This is a while ago. And I said, build, how you see yourself, your job description, or where you are. And it was fun to see how, it's fun because if you give a person a pencil and paper and saying, now draw it, people are like, I can't draw. Right, they block and saying I can't do that, and they can, but we're all different levels. But when you give them the Lego, nobody says I can't build. They start immediately there and putting something together, and it was fun to see the one that put the thinking hat on and saying I'm the engineer, I'm standing here, right, and I'm doing all this. This is my lab, and this is where I love to be. And there was another one. He had the whole. And the raw material was coming in, right? The whole manufacturing, and then he said, "Yeah, here, this is the product, and that's where I am." And so it's just as describing as well when they had to explain or to describe and saying, "This is how I see, this is how I understood your question, and this is how I see it." I think there was also one that made an airplane, and I don't know if it could actually. I don't know if they've had both wings, so there was something there as well, but it was just there was details that you needed them to describe that you got the full story. So now that you're telling me, I want to do it again. I'm like, I should do it again.
Yeah, no, it's and
yeah.
I'll work with again, whether it's individuals or teams, over and over again, so they get more and more familiar with the process. Yep, the questions are different, but it's incredibly powerful. And then when you go from an individual model in that story, and then get into the shared models and systems, and you can really spend a lot of time and getting into all of the relationships between the people, between the external agents, and all of those sorts of things. Yeah. Again, it will reveal a lot. Again, like you've just described, is that how people are thinking about things. It reveals a lot about their personality, whether they're, some people will, if one I use is, very similar, build a model that shows you in your process. Some people will literally build the model of their process. And some will build some, very esoteric, weird, crazy thing. That's just all part of the beauty of the play and method.
It's fun. And I think also you give them, when you're doing it, that using that tool, you give them an experience, right? It's not that you just standing there showing a PowerPoint or what kind of slide deck you have, because you actually are thinking in a different way. You have to explain you in a different way. It gives you an experience, so now you can reflect back to that later on. And hopefully it was a fun one, right? I think the one I did there, we were happy. It was a happy moment.
and that's what I'm thinking as you're talking, is that there's always smiles on people's faces, always laughter. And again, that's telling me that people are tapping into that play and that flow state. They're feeling safe, and that's when, again, if we're looking at what's going on in people's brains, that's when we're getting good quality thinking. That's where they're in their prefrontal cortex and they're wired in, and that's really what we want, to really optimize those situations.
So that brings me to the next one I have here, because it says with creativity, right? I think that's the fuel for innovation. So the big question here, are you born with it to be creative, or is it something you can be taught?
Great question. I think we're born with it. And I think then we're conditioned out of it. I think from the moment we're born with a thirst for learning, a thirst for knowledge, a thirst to innovate and be creative, and the world then starts to intervene and takes it away. So I feel in many ways that we have to decondition and reteach people and give them the tools to be able to start going there, because I think as human beings, that's just, we are naturally wired that way. But our society and our workplaces destroy it, really. And it's sad because, again, you know, people in the lean world, we have a set of tools, and I think sometimes we place far too much importance on the tools rather than people, but it's really people are the biggest asset. As I said, the answers to problems in organizations is already there. It's already in people's minds, and people are sometimes trapped in their minds. Knowledge is held in those silos. So yeah, it's really a case of creating, big on creating environments, creating structures that allow people to decondition and come out and create that innovative and creative environment.
Yeah, I like that. I think you're right. It gets killed on the way, or just get less. Yeah, and then you have to open it up again and ask the question and be that humble person and start being creative again, and then also go away from sometimes all the technology, because that's where your mind will start flowing and get other ideas of what you're working on.
Yeah, and I think all through our lives, you know, there's a hierarchy. There's always somebody that is seen as the expert, whether it's a school teacher or whether it's your boss at work or whatever it might be. And so we're made to feel, I'm not sure what the right word is, but lesser, and we people just accept that. I think there's a real acceptance out there, and what I'm about is really helping people to find their voice, and again, creating that environment where they legitimately do have a voice, and that voice is valued and it's heard, and better yet, that something happens from that conversation.
Yeah. So with this learning and creativity, what's the most important thing you can do in your space right now?
I think is start to look at how you can open up that conversation that I've talked about. So I think one of the words that I use a lot is assumption. So there's assumption around all parts of a business, whether it's, again, people on the front lines or management or everyone in between. So it's really about, like I said, removing fear from the environment and legitimately tapping into that conversation around how can we make things better. And I talk about, you know, the bottleneck of perfection, because I think sometimes perfection, if it can't be perfect, then we don't do anything, and that really hamstrings people. Or if I don't have the perfect solution or the perfect answer or the perfect response, again, I think that people are scared of looking silly. Again, you can look at managers sitting in a boardroom in a meeting, and people don't open their mouths because I don't want to look silly. I don't want to ask that question. Everybody's sitting there thinking about it, and it's tip of their tongue, but they just won't say it. So we need to create environments and structures that allow that to happen, and that it's actually valued, and that's what we're seeking. Sometimes that I guess that feedback is confronting. Again, you know, like I talked about with senior leaders or business owners or those sorts of people, they and I heard the phrase, nobody wants to hear their baby's ugly, you know. So nobody wants that feedback. That comes to that letting go, because initially a lot of the things that come out in a lean process, they're not great. They are the frustrations and the problems, but we just need to face that and go, okay, it is what it is. It's not it's not good, it's not bad, it just is what it is. And I think that's really, for me, that's the first steps. And then we can start to harness that. And as people feel safe, and as people are feeling reward from those conversations, and it just sort of, I think it just rolls on from there and gathers momentum. But it takes time, particularly where most organizations that I work with are starting from.
Yeah, Okay, that makes sense. So what will you tell Paul like 10 years ago?
Yeah, that's a good question, a very good question. So I would say that I'm a lifelong learner. So I think all the way through the journey, I've continued, and probably these days can deliberately more humble and more curious. So I think the advice, maybe short and sharp, would be to let go of everything you think you know. And I think that sort of mirrors my career, because I sort of came into the lean world. I practiced very simply. I did, on reflection, a lot of really cool stuff. And then I read too much, and I sort of overcomplicated things way too, and I confused things in my own mind, and I had very fixed views about certain things. And over certainly the last few years, I've let a lot of that go, and just I've come back to distill things very, very simply. And I joke with my clients. I'll say, well, yeah, I'll certainly learn more from you than you will from me, and I mean that. That is 100%. So I think from that point of view, and having that open mind, and not, someone referred to me as a lean expert. I'm not a lean expert. I'll never be a lean expert. I have lean expertise and experience, but I'm not an expert. And I'm very clear on that. So for me, yes, it's about that letting go of probably the bullshit and whatever else, the walls that we put up, and just going with it. And I think that's a great way to go.
That's a good one. Nice. Yeah, no, I agree, because every time, I'm sure, when you go out and work with a new company or a new organization, that it will never be the same, right? You will have a new challenge, or you will have a new team to work with. So then that will you will grow in different directions based on that. So that's how you're getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think every organization, every individual, every team is different, and there's different sets of challenges depending on the environment and their journey. But I think there's also a lot of common threads there too. And I know that, organization by organization, I'm going to encounter the same sets of issues. I'm going to encounter all sorts of issues, but there'll be common threads there. But yes, I just, like I said, take it as it comes, almost make things up as they go, and we'll get there in the end. What's important for me is I know where the end is. How I get there, how long it takes to get there is another question.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for being on my podcast today. I really enjoyed it, and I want to go and build with Lego now as well, just to be creative. So yeah, but thank you so much.
No, thank you, Sannah. It's been a pleasure. I'm sure we could talk for hours more.
Oh yeah, we could. We'll follow up later. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Thanks again for having me on.
If you enjoyed this podcast, and if you like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Until then, stay curious and keep learning.